Are you ready to start? You have the files I sent you. Yeah, I know it's a lot. We'll just go through a little bit of it tonight, just to get started. Your quarters are very cozy. I like what you've done with them. We're close to engineering, right? Yeah, I hear a bit of the rumble as well, but it's less than here. No, I like it. It's calming. And with all the blue colors in here, it's a bit like being on the water. You told me that you know nothing of the Syren language from before, so we are starting from scratch. Okay. Why do you want to learn it? It's just, I didn't think you were interested in linguistics at all. Oh, it has been made a requirement for the xenoarchaeology degree. And so you asked your polyglot friend to help you out. Yes, I've studied it for about 3 years now. It's one of the first languages we really dive into in xenolinguistics. Yeah, I see why they made it mandatory to learn the basics of at least one alien language for the archaeology degree as well. It is important. Why? Have you heard of linguistic relativity? It's also called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It claims that peculiarities of the language you speak determines how you see the world. Your native language can restrict, or at least shape, your ability to think about certain concepts. To become fluent in a new language therefore implies learning to think and see the world in a completely different way. And the Syren language is so different that it exemplifies that theory very well. And that's why I think it would be useful. It opens your mind. You'll see what I mean eventually. You haven't studied the Sirkai yet either, have you? Not the language or the archaeological findings. Okay, let's start with a little background info then. The remains of their civilization was discovered on Sifos 7. As far as we can tell, they looked somewhat insectoid. But what their physiology was really like is hard to tell. Remains of some outer shells have been found, but not a complete one. Yes, they had exoskeletons. It seems they disappeared some 4,000 years ago, leaving behind large cities and extensive infrastructure all over the solar system. Yeah, we don't know what happened. It seems they were able to travel in-system only, though. No interstellar travel. So we're not talking about some sort of exodus. Their home planet was quite quite far from the sun, but still in the habitable zone. But both planets further in and further out have ruins that are remarkably well preserved. Some of their archives or libraries have been found, and they contain spiraling glyphs carved into stone or metal. Few of the inscriptions are complete. They probably wrote on other, less durable materials as well. Their language has been at least partially deciphered and is now called Syrn. Tonight we will start by writing down some very basic vocabulary, and I'll give you a good amount of words to start with that you do need to memorize for the next lesson. After that, I'll give you 10 to 15 new words each lesson that you memorize to the next one, and then we use them together and put them into a larger context. And that's how we repeat what you've learned before and slowly build up your understanding. Okay, the first word is Veshtar, which is a sort of greeting. It's usually translated as hello. Let's write it down. Veshtar. It's not a transcription, it's a transliteration. It's their language, but written in our alphabet. They had their own alphabet, of course, but you need to get a good understanding for the basics before we look at that. We believe that Veshtar was also used when parting, so it could mean both hello and goodbye. But there is also another word that is used when parting, Torkai. Torkai. That's usually translated as goodbye or wishing someone a good journey, and it seems to be more formal than Veshtar. Then there is Karja, which means superior, someone above you in rank. Karja, like that. Most of certain words have 2 syllables. Some are longer, but they are quite rare. From their writing, it seems like their speech happened in a series of short 2-syllable sounds, each sound being one word or one meaning, but some are more complicated. Yes, that's the dominating theory today, at least, that the Sirkai spoke in sequences of 2 syllables at a time, with a short break between each pair of syllables, even when they had a lot to say. So in jumps and starts, and not in longer melodious sentences like we do. It's probably related to their physiognomy. The next word is Sirnu, which means friend, companion, someone you trust. Usually translated friend, yes. Sirnu. And Vorkin means enemy or opposition of some kind. which means peace. Ja Terin and Kurtan. War, yes. Kurtan. Shalith, meaning thank you. Shalith and Nursek, please. Nursek. Alright, let's repeat that. Veshta, hello and goodbye. Turkai, a more formal goodbye. Karja, superior. Zirnu, friend. Vorquin, enemy. Jatrin, peace. Kurtan, war. Shalith, thank you. Norsek, please. The most important words in our civilization are probably mother, father, son, daughter, child, family relations. These words don't change much over time. Our words for these close family relations are ancient. The Sirkai do have words for it, but they are not as prominent, and they are much more varied and complicated. Titles are more important. We have plenty of those, but very few family words. We don't really know why. There's a lot we don't understand yet. Yes, that's right. It definitely has something to do with how their society was organized, what was important and less important to them. So you see, language is also a form of anthropology. How it's put together can tell you a lot about a society, how they think, how they see the world, and so on. I'm glad you find it interesting. Let's do a few more basic words. Velra, to be or exist. Turla, to go or move. Similar to Turkai, first syllable is the same. Sankir, to speak or communicate. Shavel, to see or perceive. Norka, to eat or consume. And some essential nouns. Sorkai, home. Varki, ship or vessel. jaw, food or nourishment. Lyxen, water. Orvas, air or breath. Kirsha, fire or energy. Syntol, knowledge or wisdom or perhaps just information. So, how do we know all this? How was the language deciphered? At first, it seemed impossible. There were no bilingual texts available, no Rosetta Stone. Linguists relied on AI pattern recognition, comparative linguistics, and Sirkai artifacts to unlock the language. The first major breakthrough came from Sirkai star maps, which featured numbered coordinates. These numbers provided a foundation for understanding their numerical system and direction-based words. Then there were repeated phrases on monuments. Certain inscriptions, especially on large structures, contained recurring symbols that were hypothesized and later proven to be names or titles. But the true turning point was discovering the Sirkai resonance tablets, a set of artifacts shaped like thin metallic slabs, embedded with circular engravings and crystalline inlays. These were found deep within the ruins of an ancient Sirkai archive, stacked in a spiraling formation around a central pillar. And what made these artifacts unique? They emitted sounds. When exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies, the tablets vibrated and produced faint clicking and chirping tones. Some slabs contained identical sequences of glyphs with slightly altered spacing and structure, leading researchers to suspect they were different grammatical forms of the same sentence, like present versus past tense. Next to some inscriptions were simple arithmetic equations and star charts, which provided the first definitive CERN numerals. And linguistics believe that the tablets acted as a learning tool, potentially for young Sirkai or as a method of recording speech patterns. By analyzing the tonal shifts and comparing them to glyph variations, we slowly managed to decipher the language. It's an ongoing process. There are still many things we don't understand, or only partially understand. The spirals. Yes, many of the examples that have been uncovered has spiraled writing. It looks a bit like the growth pattern of their exoskeleton that also spirals. And the material the spiraling texts are written on is circular, yes. lines move outwards. It is possible that the circi spun the plates around as they read, but it's more likely that they could read upside down or sideways without any trouble. Yes, we do believe so. Because some writings are written in straight lines as well. Yes, spiral texts cannot be that long. If you need to write something longer, it's better to write in a straight line. But sometimes the line starts on the left and goes right. Sometimes it starts on the right and goes left. And when you reach the end of a line, the text doesn't stop. It curves down and around and goes back in the other direction, upside down. So we think they read upside down without any trouble. Might just be habit or training, or it might have something to do with how their eyes worked. There's never a break in the text, no. They didn't have anything like our line breaks or paragraphs. There is a small mark, like this one right here, that marks where you are to start reading, and then the text goes on in one continuous line, bending and turning as necessary until it ends. It is believed that the spiraling texts, although shorter, are of higher importance. They can be religious, philosophical, or related to law and the legal system. In some of the oldest spiraling texts, each ring layer seems to contain a different grammatical modifier, such as time, certainty, or emotional tone. Some inscriptions follow a branching pattern, with secondary spirals leading off from the main idea, possibly denoting subclauses or dependent phrases, or differing opinions perhaps. But there are also much smaller findings. Small stones or tablets with just one small line on them. Poetry, we believe. The way the Cyrn alphabet works, it is possible for some words to have different meaning depending on what direction you read them in. Some finds might be short poems that can be read in both directions, with contradictory or paradoxical meaning, depending on what end you start reading from. They are fascinating and beautiful. They have two of those little symbols, indicating where to start reading, one on each end. No, I wouldn't say they're untranslatable, but they have to be translated as two separate lines. We cannot blend them into one like the circi could. But it's too soon to start looking at the writing system today. Let's look at some very basic grammar. The most important thing for you to remember right now when it comes to grammar is that the Cyrn language follows an object-subject-verb structure, where we would say the circi built a city. In Cyrn, if we were to translate directly, it would say city circi built. This type of sentence structure makes us speculate whether the circi prioritized the object first, perhaps reflecting a collective found in the ruins of the biggest Cirkai metropolis we ever discovered. The inscription reads, Jatrin Cirkai Sankir Karnok Kasar. Do you recognize any of the words? Yes, the first one. Peace. It translates, the Cirkai speak peace, but it fades. And there were traces of a war in that metropolis. Some of it seems to have been damaged by explosions. It's possibly a warning or a lament. We don't know. It sounds sad to me. Someone giving up after trying for a long time to make something work. But we shouldn't read too much into it. Another peculiarity of Cyrn is that some prefixes denotes emotion or tone, changing the meaning or attitude towards the words that follow them. Prefixes are prominent in the Cern language, like here and here and here. They can mark emotions like doubt or certainty, anger or happiness. Other prefixes are used instead of past, present or future tenses. Like this one, za, that's a definite statement, it happened. This one, vir, marks future uncertainty, it may happen. And this, nox, is a form of negation, like saying it did not happen. Emotion-based prefixes can, in a similar way, modify entire phrases, like xi, which denotes happiness or hope, ul, that's anger or fear, and ri, that's mourning or loss. I have an example for you. Taxir Xantir Ulsirkai Xarvir. I would translate this as, the Cirkai may angrily speak danger, and that could be a warning of an uncertain but possible threat. Yes, I'm afraid many of the texts are this cryptic. It's a different culture, a different way of thinking. It's difficult to break into. Alright, let's move on to numbers. We've got us, 1, Trin, 2, Kael, 3, Mors, 4, Tal, 5, and Cirk, 6. One syllable, yes, but that's just the 6 first numbers. Yes, the number 6 is related to the Cirkai, the name for themselves, and that is important. Instead of a base 10 or decimal system like we use, the Cirkai used a base 6 or scenery system, which means they count using 6 as their fundamental unit rather than 10. It could be because they had 6, well, they had 8 limbs, but 6 of them were feet. Or perhaps their ancient mathematics were influenced by something intrinsic to their culture. Yeah, I understand. If you've never thought about it before, it must seem very strange. But it is arbitrary to divide groups of numbers into tens, like we do, or hundreds, which are, of course, 10 times 10, so also based on 10. In the past, our 12-based number system was used in many places, in fact, and it's not all that long ago. So, for the Cirkai, their 6 is like our 10. You can think of their numbers as going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 10. And instead of 100, they would use 36, because 6 times 6 is 36. And this word, vel, means a complete cycle of 6, so vel cirk is their version of 100, which is 36, correct. Higher numbers are formed by compounding like that, so veldrin, the equivalent of 200 in our decimal system, would be 72, yes, 36 times 2. See, you're getting it already. Using a base 6 scenery system might have affected how the Cirkai saw time, measurements, or even their philosophy. Perhaps they believed in some type of cycle of 36 years instead of our decades. And that brings us to their calendar system. Or have you had enough for one night? Should we continue for a bit longer then? Okay. The Cirkai calendar system and timekeeping, which is closely connected to their planetary environment, as it is with us, although their planetary environment is very different. I did mention that they colonized their entire solar system, right? Right, but their home planet, where they developed, shaped the calendar system they used everywhere else. And their home planet, Sci-Fi 7, is tidally locked. So, one hemisphere of the planet is always in daylight, the day side of the planet, and the other is always in darkness, the night side. A twilight band exists between them, and that's where most of their civilization resided. So instead of a day-night cycle, Cirkai timekeeping is based on thermal cycles caused by atmospheric wind currents that circulate heat around the planet. Their orbit around their star still defines a year, but the year is divided very differently from how we do it due to the lack of a rotating day and night cycle. So we have Otsir, which is one basic time unit, not too far from an hour. Otsir. Then there is Otsyrk. Yes, they sound very familiar. Otsyrk is 6 Otsir. Usually the Sirkai would be active for 4 Otsyrk and resting or sleeping for 2, so they would need a bit less rest than we do. Then there is Kortsal. Kortsal is a major division, perhaps most similar to a season, since it's based on the weather. There's also Korsil, which is a year. 1 full orbit, about the length of 1.5 of our years. They didn't seem to have anything like our months or weeks. At least we haven't seen any evidence of that. But they did have more seasons than we do, so I guess you can think of them as months. Yes, there's 6. No wonder that number was so important to them. The length of the seasons could fluctuate quite a lot from year to year, as did their work and activity level. Throughout the year, the planet went through 6 distinct phases related to the shifting heat balance and weather currents. Well, it still goes through them, of course, and some of the animal life has survived there, so we do study that as well. Exobiologists do, I mean. And the seasons are as follows. Othwell. Othwell. Dawnrise, a time of rapid temperature shifts and somehow linked to major migrations. Drinvel. Heat crest, the hottest period, when heat from dayside expands and winds intensify. Kerlvel. Storm call. Intense storms rage and the atmosphere shifts. Morsvel. Like that. Twilight calm, when winds settle and trade and travel flourish. Sirvel. Dark reach. The night side grows colder and deep sea life emerges or draws closer to the surface. In other words, fishing season. Torvel. Translated as flux cycle. Magnetic fields destabilize, and this marks the end of the year. So we know a little bit of the cultural significance of the calendar, but not too much. We know there were festivals and rituals at the shifting of each season, and that they differed depending on where they took place. Almost no one lived on dayside. It was too warm and dry, but on the border of day and night, there were a lot of settlements all over, and they extended pretty far into the night side as well, and there was a large variation of culture, mostly based on whether you lived in the twilight belt or further into night. I say they were different, but they were variations over a central theme. They were all clearly related, but shaped somewhat by the more local weather systems. But this was supposed to be a language lesson, and I think I've fed you enough glossary for one night. I did bring a few worksheets. I'll just send them to you. We can sit and work on different things for a while, and before I leave tonight, we'll go through the worksheets together, okay? You should have received them now. Good. Just let me know when you're done.